So this wasn't random, it was a deliberate sequence of decisions, each step building on the one before it. Are you guys still having a problem hearing me? I apologize, thank you so much for sticking with me here. And so those decisions had a result. The 1950s and the 60s were shaping communities all across the country through urban renewal. It was promoted as modernization, but often it targeted communities of color. So in Russell City, these county-led decisions led to the removal of the community. But before I walk you through the mechanics, I want you to understand something about Russell City. This community did not go down without a fight. So the county was required by law to hold public hearings, and in the spring of 1963, 230 residents showed up to the supervisor's chamber's office. The room overflowed. The meeting had to be stopped after 45 minutes and rescheduled. This community did not accept displacement quietly. My grandmother was among those who testified. She told them that she owned property since 1935, that she wasn't on Social Security, she wasn't on unemployment, she didn't draw no welfare, as she said. She said, "I like to be independent." Now, she did admit that conditions existed, but she told them exactly why. There had been an ordinance prohibiting people from improving their property for years. She herself had applied for a permit and was denied, and she was forced to stop working the moment the redevelopment agency came in. She also proposed solutions at the hearing. She said, bring in a sewer system, let people improve their homes. She told them, given the privilege of improving her home, they would find her doing so. And she only had one demand. She said, if they are going to take my property, I really feel like if they're going to take my place, they should give me a paid up home somewhere. Because it's paid. I don't have any mortgage. She also told them that her property taxes were $9 when she purchased her property in 1935, and that by 1963, her property taxes had gone up to $214, citing that she had been making improvements, trying to improve her property all along. After my grandmother testified, Mrs. J.M. Henry testified next, and it was pretty much the same pattern. She was desperately trying to improve her home when the authorities came in and told her to stop. Now the board heard all of this. Then they voted unanimously to proceed. So these hearings were really just a legal requirement to be met and not really a real conversation to be had with the residents for improvements. Now, along with my grandmother and Mrs. Henry, there were many residents who protested. There were many residents who testified. The record shows it. The record also shows how much that fight was worth to the people making the decisions. So for Russell City, this is exactly what happened. At first, they avoided federal funding, and that mattered because with federal funding, there would be a formal relocation in place, and the residents would have formal protections. In step 2, there wasn't a clear relocation plan. So people were displaced, there wasn't any meaningful support. People were pretty much kind of left to figure this all out on their own. And the climate at that time wasn't very friendly to people of color. Step 3 was eminent domain. Now the key issue here is compensation. Most people received only pennies on the dollar for their homes. And it definitely was not enough to replace what they had, nor could it rebuild any stability for them anywhere else. And step 4, the land was cleared, sold for industrial development. The residential area was replaced with an industrial park. And Russell City as a community, as we knew it at this point, is gone. So what happened to the people of this community? Where did they go? Well, the community was scattered. We had residents that were displaced in different directions with no effort to keep the community together. People that had lived side by side as neighbors for years, sometimes even decades. Those, networks were permanently broken. And there was an economic impact as well. Local businesses couldn't survive the displacement. My grandmother said, if I could only keep my restaurant, I could still at least make a living. She was still working. She was still self-sufficient. But facing displacement, there was no real path forward for her to support herself. And the impact didn't stop when the residents left. It continues today. There were tangible losses. So there was the loss of family homes, homes people had owned for generations. There was the loss of self-sustaining businesses. And most significantly, there was the interruption of generational wealth. Intangible losses were very real as well. We have the disruption of deep community bonds, the physical erasure of the community from the landscape. If you go down West Winton, like I told you, there's no place over there that tells you, Russell City used to be here. There's no geographic space. They've been erased from the landscape. Also, erasure of the community story from public history and memory. And that's why I'm here today. But the impact doesn't stop there. There are 3 dimensions of loss that didn't end when the city was raised, and they continue today. Also, the psychological weight of being publicly labeled as a blight, not just having your land neglected by the government, not just taken by the county, but officially declared shameful in public records and in public documents. That is its own form of harm. So when we talk about erasure, we're not talking about the past. We're talking about something that continues to shape people's lives even today. And that brings us to the next question. Why does Russell City still matter? Sometimes I hear people ask these questions, they may ask them aloud, they may ask them silently, but these questions come up about Russell City, and I think, we should talk about this. So, some people say this happened a long time ago. Why bring it up now? No one alive today caused this. It wasn't my generation that did this, so why should I care? Other people will say communities disappear all the time. Why is this different? Others may say focusing on the past keeps us from moving forward. And finally, wasn't it considered a blight anyway? Wasn't displacement justified? Well, this is why Russell City matters. It's because history shapes the present. The conditions that we see today, whether they are economic, social, or structural, they are all connected to past decisions that were made right here in Alameda County. Erasure has real consequences. So a story that's not told means that an impact has not been addressed. And unaddressed issues continue. Third, the blight label reflected disinvestment by the county, not community failure. I think we've already talked about that. The county created the conditions and then used it to take the land, use it as a justification for removal. Understanding the past leads to better decisions today, so we can't make informed choices without the honest accounting of the past. There's also preserving identity, memory, and continuity. That's for descendants and former residents. This is their family story. This is my family story. And it deserves to be told. It deserves to be part of the overall narrative. And finally, supporting accountability and justice is not about blame.